It was a cold winter evening, and Mary was scrolling through Craigslist looking for a new apartment. She stumbled upon an ad that caught her eye. A cozy little apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The rent was cheap, and it seemed too good to be true. She contacted the landlord, and he responded quickly. He told her that the apartment was available immediately, and he would be happy to show her around. They arranged to meet later that night. Mary arrived at the apartment complex, and the landlord showed her around. The apartment was small but cozy, and it had everything she needed. The landlord seemed friendly enough, and she decided to sign the lease. As she settled into her new apartment, strange things began to happen. She heard strange noises in the middle of the night, and she found things moved around her apartment. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but as the days went on, the occurrences became more frequent. One night, she woke up to find a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. She screamed, and the figure disappeared. She knew that something was wrong, and she began to investigate. As she dug deeper, she discovered that the landlord had a dark past. He had a history of stalking and harassing his tenants, and he had even been arrested for it. She realized that she was in danger, and she knew that she had to leave. She tried to break the lease and leave, but the landlord refused. He threatened her, and she knew that she was trapped. She tried to call the police, but her phone was disconnected. She was alone, and she didn't know what to do. Days turned into weeks, and Mary became more and more paranoid. She was sure that the landlord was watching her every move. One night, she heard a knock at her door. She cautiously opened it, and the landlord was standing there, holding a knife. Mary screamed and tried to run, but the landlord grabbed her and dragged her back into the apartment. He tied her up and kept her captive for weeks, torturing her and subjecting her to unspeakable horrors. Eventually, the police found Mary's apartment, and they arrested the landlord. Mary survived, but she was never the same. She had nightmares every night, and she was plagued by fear and anxiety. She knew that she had narrowly escaped death, and she made a vow to never trust anyone again. It was a chilly evening when Karen was scrolling through Craigslist in search of a new apartment. She came across an ad for a beautiful studio apartment at a reasonable price. The ad said that the apartment was in a great location, had all the amenities she needed, and the landlord was a kind and friendly person. Karen quickly contacted the landlord and set up a viewing for the next day. She was excited about the prospect of a new place to call home. When she arrived at the apartment, she was immediately impressed. It was even better than the pictures in the ad, and the landlord seemed nice and accommodating. Karen decided to take the apartment, and she moved in the following week. At first, everything seemed fine, but as the days went on, Karen began to notice strange things happening. She would hear footsteps in the middle of the night, but when she checked, no one was there. She would find objects moved from their usual place, and strange scratches appeared on the walls. Karen tried to brush it off as her imagination, but things got worse. One night, she woke up to find a dark figure standing at the foot of her bed. It was a shadowy, indistinct shape, but it seemed to be staring at her with malevolent intent. Karen was terrified and called the police, but they found nothing suspicious. The next day, Karen confronted the landlord about the strange happenings in her apartment. To her surprise, the landlord seemed unconcerned and even dismissive of her concerns. Karen began to suspect that the landlord was hiding something. Determined to get to the bottom of the situation, Karen did some research and discovered that the building had a dark history. It had been the site of a gruesome murder years before, and many believed that the victim's spirit still haunted the place. Karen knew that she had to get out of the apartment as soon as possible, but the landlord was uncooperative and refused to let her break her lease. Karen was trapped and scared, and she didn't know what to do. As the days went on, the paranormal activity intensified. Karen would wake up to find strange symbols etched into the walls, and she would hear disembodied whispers in the night. She knew that she was in danger, and she had to act fast. Karen managed to get in touch with a paranormal investigator who agreed to help her. Together, they conducted a seance in the apartment and managed to contact the spirit of the murder victim. They learned that the landlord was actually the killer, and he had been hiding in plain sight for years. With the evidence they gathered, Karen was finally able to break her lease and move out of the apartment. The landlord was arrested and brought to justice for his crimes, and Karen was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. But she would never forget the horrors she experienced in that Craigslist apartment. I was scrolling through Craigslist looking for cheap furniture when I stumbled upon a bizarre listing. The title simply read, "Roommate wanted. No experience necessary." The ad went on to explain that the owner of the house was looking for someone to share the rent with, and that they were willing to waive the deposit and the first month's rent. It all sounded too good to be true. I decided to respond to the ad, and within minutes, I received a response. The owner of the house introduced himself as Mike and said that he would be happy to show me the house. I agreed to meet him the following day. As soon as I walked into the house, I knew something was off. The lights were dim and the air was stale. Mike gave me a quick tour of the house, and I couldn't help but notice the strange markings on the walls and floors. I brushed it off, thinking it must be some kind of artistic expression. Mike showed me to my room, and I immediately felt uneasy. The room was small and cramped, with a musty smell. But what really got to me was the small closet in the corner. It was old and rusted, and there was a strange smell coming from it. I tried to ignore it and settled into the room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I started hearing strange noises at night, like scratching and whispering, and the marks on the walls and floors seemed to be moving, almost like they were alive. One night, I decided to investigate the strange closet. I opened it slowly and was hit with a foul smell. Inside, I found a pile of human bones and hair. I was horrified and immediately ran out of the room. I confronted Mike the next day, and he admitted to being a serial killer. He had been using the room to store his victims' remains. I called the police, and Mike was arrested. I moved out of the house as quickly as possible, but the memory of that room still haunts me to this day. From that day on, I made sure to thoroughly research any listings before responding to them. You never know who might be lurking behind an innocent Craigslist ad.